Today's talk is about Alchemy and the Genizot. Genizot are places where old pieces of Hebrew language manuscripts were stored, since Jews regarded anything written in the Hebrew alphabet as being holy and should not simply just tossed out. But I first have to define what alchemy means to me here, because the word has been used in so many ways just to describe so many things. I'm speaking here of transformations of matter, especially in the effort to produce silver or gold. Preferably, these transformations should take place within a wider context of the theories of matter and the transformation of matter, and even more preferably, the instructions should be couched in elusive language, ciphers, and other trappings of the mysterious. Now, just how well is alchemy represented in the Genizot? Well, in fact, it's not represented at all. There aren't very many items, and this is an accurate reflection of the relatively low level of interest in alchemy in the various Jewish communities. Gideon Bohak, scholar in Jewish magic, counts 68 fragments, which is in the Cambridge collection, which is by far the smallest of the textual groups that are of interest to him: magic, alchemy, and the like. And the wonderful resource of the Freiburg website for Genizot materials does not even have alchemy as a subject heading, so this wonderful resource cannot be utilized for someone searching for alchemical fragments. And in fact, the only Genizot document that looks to me to be of any real importance for the history of alchemy is the St. Petersburg manuscript, which will be the centerpiece of this presentation. So, in preparing this talk, I found 3 substantial fragments, that is more than 5 folios, because I'm really not a Genizot person. I like working with big chunks of text, and there are many huge alchemical manuscripts that have not even been looked at. But conveniently, these 3 exemplars are spread out among the three different libraries, and in fact, they represent very well 3 different types of alchemical manuscripts. So these 3 items, one comes from Cambridge, and it's a specimen of the so-called Sifrei Sodot, the Books of Secrets. The other is from Manchester, a specimen of the trade manual for metalworkers, jewelers, and other crafts. And the third is a classical alchemical text preserving many recipes. This is the St. Petersburg manuscript, which has some very interesting items for the history of alchemy. So very briefly, the specimen in Cambridge belongs to this very large body of texts in Hebrew and in European languages, books of secrets that have a variety of miscellaneous recipes for therapy, medical recipes, charms, curses, and the like, with some a very few number of recipes that can be identified as alchemical. This Cambridge manuscript is in the most part in Hebrew, but there are a few in Yiddish or Judeo-German as well. And so you see here the 2 recipes that are identifiably alchemical. The second line of text, the Haziv Mashet Yirtzeh V'lo Zahav, to gild something, to look golden even though you're not using any gold. And the one beneath it, La'asot Zahav Adom, to make red gold. Red was considered the distinctive color of gold in medieval science and alchemy. Manchester text is essentially a handbook for artisans, organized topically, that is, recipes for metalworkers, glassworkers, jewelers, both legitimate and illegitimate activity, people who are fooling around with the weight of coins. There are many Romance terms. It looks to be Italian to me, but in other languages, even Turkish, and 1 paragraph Arabic and Hebrew letters, which presents what seems to be one of the recipes in these medical works that are ascribed to Aristotle for an eye medication. This, along with the Deknamen, calling gold, referring to gold as the sun, and the silver as the moon, are the sort of the things that connect this manuscript to alchemy, properly speaking. As I said, it's mostly a trade manual, and Raphael Patai, in his book on the Jewish alchemists, which is to date the most thorough study devoted an entire chapter to this manuscript. There's a lot more that can be done, that we should be thankful for Patai for making the wonderful contribution that he made. Now, the St. Petersburg manuscript, I'm speaking here of the largest fragment, but there are, as you can see on the screen, several other smaller fragments that, according to the notes that the catalogers in St. Petersburg have inserted with the manuscript, belong to the same text. I haven't had a chance to look at those yet. I'm still hard at work on this large chunk of text, over 20 folio, over 500 items numbered sequentially, though some of the leaves have fallen out, so we don't have the whole thing. And I don't see any important principle of organization. There's some recipes seem to be, similar recipes to come one after the other, but I don't see any principle of organization so far. There are two colophons which give nothing but the date. One of them, the date is erased. The other, we see the Hijri year 1059, which corresponds smack to the middle of the 17th century, and that makes a lot of sense with regard to the contents as well. It's certainly a transcription into Hebrew letters of something that was written by an Islamic alchemist, and it employs at times strange and as yet undeciphered ciphers, and I can't rule out the possibility that these ciphers are actually European in origin. So here we have an example of instructions to produce gold or silver, which involves a rather elaborate, for this sort of text, theory of matter, and something that I have not yet found in any other Arabic or chemical text. We instructed to compound the mineral stone, al-Hajj al-Ma'adani, being another one of the names used for the elixir, and the book tells us that the mineral stone is compounded out of 4 elements, just like the egg. This connection, or this analogy between with the egg is not unusual and interesting. From a spirit, body, soul, and a bonding agent, the mu'allif. The spirit here is interestingly enough, a plant, darnel, zawan, and the soul is sulfur and arsenic. We're used to having, sulfur and mercury come together. But in fact, Zosimus, the early Greek alchemist, called arsenic the second mercury. So it's unusual, but it's not totally incomprehensible. Body is gold or silver, tin, copper, lead, and iron. And the bonder, which bonds together spirit, soul, and body, is sal, ammoniac, and vitriol. If the elixir is red, that is, the elixir is meant to produce gold. But if the elixir is the white elixir, that meant to produce silver, then the bonding agent is sal, ammoniac, alum, alkali salt, egg, and hair salt. Know this. Now here we have another recipe for making gold, which I've chosen because it shows so many diverse influences, if you wish to call, how many different elements that we find in alchemy coming together in this one recipe. We are first told to take hair, wash it with soap, immerse it in blood taken from a phlebotomy, immerse them both in sulfur, and place in a sealed jar and bury in elephant dung for 21 days. Then take out the jar, take the worms that are now found in the mixture, feed the worms on leaves until they become as large as silkworms. Then kill the worms, dry them, pulverize them together with sulfur and sal ammoniac until they are well mixed. Then pulverize the mixture together with, quote, the slave. Then put the resulting drug in a crucible, pour mercury over it until it's completely covered, and place on the fire until it hardens. Let it cool till morning. A stone will be reduced. Take 1 part stone and 70 parts lead, and you will make pure gold. So, look what we have here. First of all, we have the use of both animal, that is blood and hair, and mineral ingredients. We have the use of elephant dung, which I think would perhaps indicate an Indian source, so this is not Indian alchemy, but I mean, where else were we going to find elephants? Then the first stage produces worms, which are grown to silkworms. Now, some alchemists point to the spontaneous generation of worms, as it was believed in biology until relatively recently, as an analog, a hint at the type of transformation which the alchemists are aiming at. And others, on the other hand, spoke of more of a natural transformation, such as the way the silk was made from worms. And so we have here both of them together in this part of the recipe. And finally, the reference at the end to this mixture as drugs, akakir, and both alchemy as a way of healing nature. That is to say, the idea that non-precious metals are sick metals which have to be healed by the alchemical process, as well as many other connections between alchemy and medicine, again comes out in this recipe. Now, before proceeding any further, I have to say a few things about the historiography of alchemy and see how we can place this manuscript within it. There is a relative dearth of studies which actually translate and explain in modern terms the processes described in Arabic alchemical manuscripts, and there are many, many alchemical manuscripts. I have in my electronic vaults dozens and dozens. No one's really carrying on the work begun generations ago by Eric John Holmyard, or even by Manusher Paslimi in a relatively unknown doctoral thesis. There is some good work being done. I don't want to start naming names and, heaven forbid, miss someone, but there's nothing really being done on the scale and the quality of Holmyard and his collaborators. Nor in the field of Arabic alchemy is there anything being done comparable to the work of Lawrence Principe and William Bill Newman, who have enriched the field of early modern alchemy, or as Newman likes to call it, chemistry, with invaluable studies. Now, there are several recipes in St. Petersburg that look to be extremely interesting on the basis of parallels in name, though not in content, to materials that have been studied by Principe and Newman, and we will be interested in seeing how these recipes compare with similar ones in Islamic and Hellenistic and other sources, but I've yet found few comparanda beyond the items that I have in my manuscript. In other words, there looks to be an interesting way of tracing some of these concepts, such as the perfect mixture of the Hermes tree, but we're missing many parts of the puzzle, many links in the chain. So I've decided to focus in this talk on the Hermes tree, which is the paragraph that I've made the most progress on. It figures in the work of Renaissance and early modern alchemists, and Lawrence Principe suggests three alternatives for understanding this image. One, it is simply a common alchemical analog for the production of growth of gold. It's a manifestation of Jung's collective unconscious, and it's an appropriate image for an alchemical experiment that is actually reproduced over and over again. Principe was professor of chemistry as well as professor of history of science, then proceeded to reproduce in his own laboratory the animated mercury, which the alchemists spoke about and which is connected to the Hermes tree. It's some sort of a crystal growth, if I understand. And this made a huge impact on the field when people saw that you actually have to take these recipes seriously from a point of view of chemistry, that they work. So here we have the beginning of the recipe from the St. Petersburg manuscript. You can see in the margin the number. It's number 265. Begins called Sifa, or Sifat, meaning description. And then it says Sajarat Hermes, Sajara, not Shajara. Wahia Tanbeit, Fi Arish Misr, Waraza, Wa Idku, Waskandaria, Wasa'ir Liman or Ramal. So it grows in Al Arish of Egypt, in Gaza, in Idku. This is this city on the northern coast of Sinai, which had a very important temple, and is still called in Arabic today Medinat al-Nujum, the city of the stars, and Alexandria, and the other ports. Laha Basal Kal Unsel. It has a onion. I guess it's the way of describing the fruit, which is like unsel, which is squill. Ta'amal or tu'amal kama hiya ma asluha wa rakuha wa furuha. Not quite sure what this means, but he's saying that take it as it is, the roots, the leaves, and the branches. وقالوا الحكماء إن هذه الحشيشة قليلة المثل عجيبة الفعل. And the wise people, the scholars, have said that this grass, this plant, has It has very few things, very few analogs, very few things similar to it, and it has wondrous activities. Let's say it has wondrous properties. So the Hermes tree in the St. Petersburg manuscript begins with a botanical description, giving the range of the tree and a brief description of its fruit, making you think that he's talking about a real tree. And it's followed by an assertion of the wise ones, the scholars of Hukama, concerning the wondrous properties, then followed by a detailed description of the chemical processes that one does on this fruit. And then there are two statements made concerning what one does with the product, the end product. One is that when reacting with silver, it will produce first-class gold, Ibriz Alin, red like Egyptian gold, but also a statement attributed to Hermes with more specific or more detailed description of what it does. It repairs every defect and has a stature of mineral gold. It aids against an admixture of cracks, that is to say, it helps when you have impurities or cracks in the gold, and the powder that is produced should be mixed with olive oil. So this seems to me to perhaps indicate that we have here something that is used in the process of gilding or repairing cracked vessels that have been gilded. I'll come back to this in a few minutes. Let me just say at the very end of the recipe, the existence of the plant seems to be confirmed by the author, where he says, وَسَمِعْتُهَا فَاطْلُبُهَا تَجِدُهَا فَهِيَ مَوْجُودَةٌ بِعِشْمِسَ فِي كُلْ أَوَانٍ. I've heard about it, seek it and you will find it. It is found in Arish, that is El Arish in Egypt, at all times. So clearly he has in mind here a real tree, not a crystal growth. But today, the only discussion of the Hermes tree in Islamic sources that I found is in some publications of an Italian scholar by the name of Paola Carusi, especially the one that's on your screen. She knows of some mythic accounts of the tree, connecting or identifying it with the trees of the Garden of Eden, or a tree that Hermes saw growing next to a temple in Egypt, but nothing like the botanical description giving the range of the tree and the description of its fruit, as well as the chemical processes that are described in the St. Petersburg manuscript. She also mentions a Persian treatise which she had been working on and may be still working on, which is on Risalat al-Sajra min Kal Hermes al-Hakim. That's a treatise on the tree from the teachings of Hermes, which she's studying, but apparently this research has not yet been completed. So I think that in the interpretation of this recipe, which I still have not figured out completely, but I think I've made some progress, we're confronted with choices similar to those listed by Professor Principi with regard to the Hermes tree. It may be an allegory for spiritual development, and there are such things in Islamic alchemy. There are things which are purely allegories to use by the Sufis to describe spiritual development. It may also, however, be a formula for the manufacture of a substance that mixed with olive oil will be useful in gilding, perhaps what it's called depletion gilding, that is to say, in order to fix gold onto a vessel, you have to make an alloy of gold, and then after the gold has been completely glued onto the vessel, you can use other substances to take out some of the alloys and have a pure gold finish to the vessel. This could be what he has in mind, as well as repairing cracks. It could be. This has to be studied in more detail, and maybe someday I'll have a laboratory and try and figure these things out myself. I favor the second option, but dozens of others in this fascinating manuscript, it requires much, quote, further study. Thank you for listening.